Stranger Things has finally opened the gate to its 5th and final season. So, what's the deeper meaning of what we've learned from Volume 1 of Season 5? And what does it tell us about how this entire saga might end? Let's take a closer look. Make sure to let us know your thoughts on Season 5 so far in the comments. Stranger Things' 4th season left us in a pretty terrifying place. The gang had seemingly finally dispatched Vecna, but Max's temporary departure from the world of the living allowed Vecna's gates to open and engulf Hawkins.
This was a natural phenomenon never before seen by man, a phenomenon now covered up by a giant metal band-aid.
Volume 1 of Season 5 opens after an 18-month time jump. The military has quarantined Hawkins, and while Vecna has been dormant, the group has been attempting to learn more about the Upside Down in order to finally defeat him for good. Though time has moved on, the trauma of the events of Season 4 still linger. Dustin was hit particularly hard by Eddie's death, and even now has a difficult time dealing with his grief, leading to him acting out and sometimes even taking out his anger on those around him. Lucas has stayed by Max's side as she's been stuck in the coma. And we eventually learn that she hasn't just been stuck in the black void Eleven saw at the end of the last season, but in fact has been trapped inside Vecna's memories for nearly 2 whole years, leading the military operation on Hawkins, and somehow in the Upside Down is Dr. K. They're not just in town to deal with the rift, they're also hunting Eleven because as far as they're concerned, she's the one who caused all of this destruction. This has meant that Eleven has had to spend the time since the rift opened back to her old ways, hiding out with Hopper and Joyce and training her powers. Though she's growing stronger and more capable, he's still as overprotective as ever, forcing her to stay behind while he goes out on patrols in the Upside Down. Nancy, Robin, Steve, and Johnathan assist in this effort through their work at the local radio station, where they're able to send out coded messages to Hopper and the others undetected. Mike and Nancy's younger sister Holly has been aged up considerably so that she can be a part of the new cohort of kids on the show now that the original kids are all essentially adults. Though Mike initially brushes off Holly's talk about her imaginary friend, once she's kidnapped and his parents are hospitalized, he begins to realize who has really been befriending his sister. Though his initial disappearance and eventual escape from the Upside Down was the central focus of Season 1, it's not really until now that Will is finally given the chance to really step into the spotlight. He grapples with embracing his queer identity while also having to deal with everything else that's going on in his life. Thankfully, Robin is there to lend him some advice and give him some reassurance. The original victim of the show, he's begun to realize that his connection to the hive mind in Vecna is a lot deeper than he had previously understood, and might make him the key to saving everyone. The Upside Down still poses a major threat, but it's much less nebulous than in earlier seasons. The show has always been, on some level, about the anxieties of adolescence and all of the unknowns that come with growing up and figuring out who you are. Now, as the group has gotten older, they've also been able to figure out ways to better understand those mysteries of the self and to become active participants in finding solutions. And we can see this change reflected in their changing relationship with the Upside Down. It's still a major, scary threat, but they're working to map it out and truly understand it so that they can really overcome it and move on with their lives, instead of being trapped in this cycle forever. Before we jump into where things might be leading in the final episodes, let's take a closer look at some of the key themes and symbolism that have popped up in this season so far. False protectors. Mr. Whatsit, Holly's imaginary friend, turns out to be none other than Vecna himself working to lure her into his trap. He's always fed on the fears and anxieties of children, and now that the original kids are growing up, he's looking for new victims. And in his interactions with Holly, he represents one of the biggest fears children have to deal with, thinking someone is safe and kind, only to realize that they're anything but. We can also see this idea of fake guardians in the military on the show. From their setting off the entire problem in their search for the best new tech, to the military now taking over Hawkins to protect them while actually wanting to use them for their own gain. The holiday season might not be as stressful as fighting Vecna in the Upside Down, but it's definitely up there. Between buying gifts, traveling, hosting, and everything else, it's easy to fly through this season only to find yourself in the new year wondering where all of your money went. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop or your phone. And right now, just for our listeners, Monarch is offering 50% off your first year. Monarch makes it so easy to track all of my expenses so I can really stay on top of my holiday budget. Monarch allows me to see where my money is going in and out so I can spot problems before they bubble over and adjust accordingly. This also then helps with all of my end-of-year financial planning so that I can make sure that I'm on the right track going into the new year, so that I don't have to spend January stressing either. With Monarch, you can link all of your accounts in minutes and quickly get clear visuals of all of your financial data and start getting control of your money. This means you can more easily find places you could be saving more or upping your investments, helping you achieve your financial goals even faster. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code THETAKE at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code THETAKE. Hiding has long been a theme on the show, and it's come to the fore to a degree in this season. On the one side, there are those like Will and Eleven who feel forced to hide as the only means they have to protect themselves. Like so many things in their lives, this state isn't something that they want, but they fear that coming out of hiding too soon could be disastrous. On the other side, there's that fear of the unknown, like Vecna lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The show illustrates the reverberating effects of trauma in a number of ways. For example, Dustin's life unraveling as he's unable to cope with Eddie's passing. Or Max being stuck not only in a coma, but trapped living in the world of the person who put her there. Will's trauma from being kidnapped has stayed with him, but also changed him. He has become tethered to this person who harmed him. But he comes to realize that he can actually use this to his advantage. Vecna himself is of course a major example of this as well. His backstory, which was more fleshed out in the Stranger Things stage play The First Shadow, which does seem to be canon within the world of the show as well, is rife with trauma. And it's exactly this, and his isolation, that allowed the Shadow, which turns out to be the Mind Flayer, to influence and eventually possess him. Vecna attempts to continue this cycle with Will, but Will isn't alone and isolated. He has an entire group of people who care very deeply about him, and it's this that gives him the power to fight back. Out of this world powers, of course, add to the sci-fi, supernatural vibe of the show, but they're also important thematically for tracking characters' growth. Eleven has continued to train and hone her powers, feeling like she has to focus on this above everything else because it's up to her to save everyone. She also realizes that the military has something able to limit her powers, and it turns out to be none other than Kali. In the same way the people she cares about can help nurture her powers and growth as a person, they can also be used to hold her back. Will has found a new level of self-confidence in who he is, and this is mirrored in his new control of his powers. In both, we can also see how others wish to use their powers for their own ends, and are willing to harm them to do so.
You and I, we are going to do such beautiful things together.
So where does all of this leave us in the lead up to the show's ending? The show has expanded so far beyond that original tale of a small town beset by unknown sci-fi horrors. But it seems like in the final season they may be setting things up to get back to those roots. And with how Volume 1 ended, there are now so many questions about what could be to come in Volume 2 and the finale. How exactly does Vecna want to reshape the world? Is Will actually able to go toe-to-toe with him, or was that actually all just a part of Vecna's plan to get Will to fully embrace his powers so that he can use them? How will Max and Holly escape? Will a main character be killed off before the end of the show? Maybe Steve, who originally wasn't even supposed to survive past Season 1. Maybe Max won't make it out after all. Or maybe Eleven will end up sacrificing herself to finally end the horrors once and for all. While Volume 1 was a fun time, it of course wasn't all perfect. While this volume did thankfully tighten the geographic scope of the story back to Hawkins and the Upside Down, the show has continued to add more new characters and plot threads even in this final season, which could mean they'll have a more difficult time effectively tying everything up by the finale. The show has become so focused on action and spectacle that it does sometimes feel like it's forgotten its spooky roots, though this volume thankfully does have some great creepy moments. While there have been a few gutting character losses over the past few seasons, due to a number of fake-outs, death has lost a lot of its stakes on the show for the main characters. And unfortunately, Volume 1 follows suit by repeatedly sidestepping what likely should be pretty gnarly outcomes for the main characters. Of course, as a show, it makes sense that they want to keep around all of the familiar faces fans love for as long as possible, but over time it does begin to lessen the effect of any precarious situation because we no longer truly believe that any of them are in real danger. There's also a bit of an issue with an overload of overt exposition, which does start to feel like a second screen writing problem at some points. Which is where writers are forced to write their scripts knowing that people will be scrolling on their phones while watching, so everything needs to be explained out loud. We've got a video that goes more in depth on that problem if you want to know more. But it's also just as likely just to set everything up to make sure everyone understands what's going on before the final episodes. While Stranger Things is a mega phenomenon, in some ways it's also having to battle against that same sentiment. Viewer feelings and watching habits have changed quite a bit since the show first began almost a decade ago. So while it was able to burst onto the scene then and essentially set the gold standard for streaming must-see TV, it's now got a lot more to live up to. The show has always been referential and fan servicey, but now it's such a large part of the culture in its own right, it does at times almost feel like it's begun to turn back onto itself in an attempt to connect back to that original show we all loved so much. But Volume 1 of Season 5 is really just about getting us all back into the world of Stranger Things and setting everything up for the actual conclusion. It's intense and entertaining, and at least seems to be setting itself up for a thrilling conclusion that will hopefully answer a lot of questions, but also tie up the narrative in a satisfying way. We can't wait to see what happens in Volume 2. Let us know, what are your thoughts on the season so far? And how do you think the various characters' arcs will play out in the end?
That's the take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.